Hello guys, in this video we are going to see about types of communication, 7 C's of communication and barriers of communication. It is a continuation from my previous video. Now moving on to, we can see each topic in detail. That we are going to discuss is about types of communication. The communication is basically categorized into 5 main types. That is based on medium or form, based on flow, based on organizational relationship, based on formality, and the last category is based on parties involved. Now let's see each category in detail. First category of communication is based on medium or form. On the basis of that, it is categorized into two, that is verbal communication and non-verbal communication. First of all, verbal communication. Verbal communication, it means communicating with words, written or spoken. The sender gives words to his feelings, thoughts, ideas, and opinions and expresses them in the form of speeches, discussions, presentations, and conversations. The next thing that we are going to see is about the types of verbal communication. Again, verbal communication is categorized into two main types, that is oral communication and written communication. Now we are going to see each type in detail. First one is oral communication. Oral communication, that is a face-to-face or indirect interaction between the sender and the receiver, is called as oral communication. It's mainly communication which makes use of words and involves speaking and listening. When we listen to a lecture in the class or when we speak in telephonic conversation, all these are comes under the oral communication. Under verbal communication is written communication. In this type of communication, the sender uses the written mode to transmit his or her messages. Written symbols are used in this type of communication. Simply, it means any message exchanged between two or more persons that make use of written words is written communication. In workplace, written communication skills are needed for writing emails, memos, reports, business letters, fax, etc. Some people have difficulty in putting their thoughts into words. Other people find it easier to communicate by using written communication skills. Reading newspaper and books may help improve writing skills. Next, we are going to see about non-verbal communication. Non-verbal communication happens when a sender sends a message without using any words. In this type of communication, no particular form of words are used. Here, the process requires non-verbal cues to be transmitted and received. Nonverbal communication includes two main parts, that is body language and paralinguistic features. First of all, we are going to see about body language. It involves aspects such as personal appearance, walk, gestures, facial expressions, posture, eye contact, hand movements, etc. The body language here simply means the way or how we use our body while we are communicating with other person. Linguistic features. These are the vocal effects we can employ when we speak. It includes person's voice, volume, pitch, rate, pauses, articulation, voice modulation, etc. It mainly refers to how we use our voice to modulate the way we talk and express different expressions while communicating with others. We finished the first category, that is based on medium or form. Now moving on to, we are going to see about the second category, that is based on flow. Based on flow, communication is categorized into two main types, that is vertical communication and horizontal communication. Now we are going to see each type in detail. First one is the vertical communication. The information flows either from superior to subordinates or from subordinates to supervisor within an organizational structure. It is again categorized into two on the basis of the flow of information, that is upward communication and downward communication. The picture that is shown on the left side depicts the upward and downward flow of communication. First one is communication from the subordinates to superiors, and it shows the upward communication, and the second one is communication from superiors to subordinates, and it depicts the downward communication. The arrow mark represents the flow of communication, and that's how we categorize it, upward and downward communication. Going to see about horizontal communication. This type of communication occurs between the same level or units or departments in an organization. Communication within a team is an example of horizontal communication. Members coordinate tasks, work together, and resolve conflicts are best examples of horizontal communication. Horizontal communication is also known as lateral communication. We finished the second category of communication. Now moving on to, we are going to see about communication on basis of formality. On the basis of formality, the communication is again categorized into two main types, that is formal communication and informal communication. We are going to see formal communication first. Communication takes place through official channels in an organization designed by the management. Communication occurs through officially recognized positions to ensure a smooth, orderly, accurate, and timely flow of information. In case of informal communication, the casual communication between co-workers in the workplace represents informal communication. It is unofficial in nature and is based on the social relationships that are formed in a workplace outside of the normal hierarchy of business structure. Category that we are going to see is communication that is based on organizational relationship. On the basis of organizational relationship, communication is categorized into internal communication and external communication. This type of communication is mainly in an organizational structure. So first one is internal communication. It is the communication process that occurs within an organization. The participants in this type of communication is the employees and other staffs within the organization. External communication. External communication simply means the communication between a business and other person or entity in the company's external environment. Communication between customers, potential customers, suppliers, investors, shareholders, and society at large are the examples of external communication. The last category of communication is based on parties involved. On the basis of parties involved, communication is mainly categorized into intrapersonal communication, extrapersonal communication, mass communication, media communication, and interpersonal communication. So based on parties, communication is categorized into five main types. That we are going to see is intrapersonal communication. Whenever communication takes place within one's self, it is termed as intrapersonal communication. This implies individual reflection, contemplation, and meditation. It simply means that we talk with ourselves. That is intrapersonal communication. One type that we are going to see is interpersonal communication. It occurs between two or more persons. It is the exchange of information, ideas, feelings, and meaning between two or more people through verbal and or non-verbal methods. It often includes face-to-face exchange of messages which may take form of a certain tone of voice, facial expressions, body language, and gestures. Next type of communication is extrapersonal communication. This form of communication happens when we communicate with non-human entity. For example, when we command our pet dog or cat to sit or stand or go, they follow our orders. Simply the way we communicate with our pets. It means an extrapersonal communication. The next category is mass communication. This type of communication occurs when a person delivers a message to large audience. Medium of this type of communication is books, press, cinema, radio, internet, etc. This type of communication mainly used to communicate with a large audience or to deliver a message to large number of people at a time. Last type of communication and the parties involved is media communication. It includes communication that takes place only with the help of electronic media such as computers, phones, television, etc. The internet has become a major means of all sorts of official and personal communication. So, by this, we completed the types of communication. Now, we are going to see the next topic, that is barriers of communication. Barriers of communication simply means the things that hinder the communication process a successful one. So the barriers are mainly categorized into four, that is verbal barriers, non-verbal barriers, listening barriers, and miscellaneous barriers. The first barrier we are going to see is verbal barriers. Under that, the first barrier is lack of proper planning. Lack of proper planning simply means that if we start communication without a proper planning or how to communicate, what are things we have to say without a planning, then it will hinder the communication process. Then the next one is variation in language. We all know that in the same language there will be some variation in how we speak it. The terms that we are used in American accent or British accent, the meaning will be different. So these variations in language cause hindrance in the communication process. Then the second one is different perception of a message. The sender sent a message meaning something in his mind, but the receiver perceived it in a different manner. Then there is no proper communication happening between them. The next one is selection of a wrong variety of language. If the sender is from one country and the receiver is from another country, then there will be a language difference. So if we select the wrong variety of language, then the receiver may not be understanding the message that is communicated by the sender. Then last one is badly encoded and wrongly decoded messages. In the previous video, I already discussed about the encoding and decoding of the messages. If the message is encoded in a wrong way and the receiver decoded it in the wrong way, then the message cannot be communicated in a proper way. These are the verbal barriers. To see about the next barrier, that is non-verbal barriers. Non-verbal barrier, when verbal and non-verbal messages clash, receivers tend to trust the non-verbal messages. Some of the main non-verbal barriers are no enthusiasm, lack of focus, emotions, expressions on face, rolling eyes, avoiding eye contact, etc. The next barrier of communication is listening barriers. Making the speaker feel as though he or she is wasting the listener's time is one of the listening barrier. Then the second one is Be distracted by something that is not part of the ongoing communication. If we are distracted by some other things while some person is speaking, then it will cause listening barrier. Then the next one is getting ahead of the speaker and completing his or her thoughts. Before the speaker finishes his or her conversation, we are thinking ahead of that and completing that communication in our mind. Then it also causes listening barriers. Asking too many questions for the sake of probing. If a person is communicating, if we simply ask too many questions intermediately, then it will cause listening barriers and the communication process will not be takes place in a proper. The last barrier in communication is miscellaneous barrier. That first one is premature evaluation of messages. If before completing the message we are evaluating the message prematurely, then it will hinder the communication process. Then the second type is information overload. If we are communicating with one person, we should give some time for that person to process the information that he got. Otherwise, it will be an information overload and the correct meaning of the communication will not be conveyed. Then the third one is emotional reaction. The emotional reaction of the receiver is also an important aspect in communication process. If the communication or the information that he got, he take it in a negative way or the way that he should be taken or meant by the center, then it will cause an emotional reaction and cause hindrance in the communication process. And the last one is a rigid attitude. A rigid attitude means the receiver or the sender already have a prefixed attitude. Then whatever information we convey to them, they will not be taking it in the right manner. So these are the barriers that cause hindrance in the communication process. The last topic in this video is 7 C's of communication. First of all, we are going to see what are the 7 C's. First one is clarity. Second one is completeness. Third one is courtesy. Fourth one is correctness. Fifth one is concreteness. Sixth one is conciseness. And the last one is candidness. We all should ensure that we satisfy all these 7 C's in our communication process to make it a successful one. Clarity simply means that we should be clear in our communication process so that the receiver can understand the message in a proper manner. Completeness means that whatever information we are conveying to the receiver, it should be in a complete format. There should not be any breakage in the information that we are conveying to the receiver. Otherwise, the receiver cannot understand the message in a proper manner. Next one is conciseness. Conciseness means that we should avoid repetition. That the message should be conveyed to the receiver without repetition in the message. If there is repetition, the receiver will find it difficult to understand the messages in a proper manner. The next one is concreteness. Concreteness simply means that we specific and definite in describing events. Whatever things we are saying, we should be specific about what the things that we are going to say to the listener. The next one is correctness. In any form of communication, correctness is a must. That is, there should not be any grammatical errors or technical errors that will cause hindrance in the communication process, that will make the receiver to understand the communication in the proper manner. So we must ensure that the messages are conveyed in a proper manner, in a correct way. The next one is courtesy. In conversational situations, meetings, or group discussions, an effective speaker maintains the proper decorum of speaking. In this way, the listeners will think that the speaker is not very rude, and that way we can get proper attention of the listeners. Then the last one is candidness. Candidness means we should convey our messages in an honest and sincere way, and we should not have any prejudice or bias while communicating with the others. In this way, we can communicate in a proper manner and thus make the communication process a successful one. So we must ensure that we follow all these 7 C's while communicating with others. So that's all for this video. We can see in the next video. Thank you.